Can I help you find the exit? The words weren't shouted, they weren't even said with malice, they were worse than that. They were said with ease. Like breathing. Like greeting someone at the door. Like telling a leaf it didn't belong on marble floors. She had just stepped inside. The boutique was silent in that curated kind of ways-off lighting, polished floors, glass display cases glowing with handbags that cost more than some people's rent. A white man behind the counter looked up from his tablet, eyes scanning her slowly before resting somewhere over her shoulder, like she couldn't possibly be the reason the bell had chimed. She stood still, let the air settle around her. Her outfit was intentional. Tailored black slacks, a silk blouse tucked clean at the waist, minimal jewelry, no loud logos, no oversized sunglasses, just quiet, confident wealth. The kind that doesn't scream because it doesn't have to. Her shoes were soft leather, her bag structured and expensive, but anonymous. She didn't flinch at the man's words. She had heard worse. She had heard quieter. "I'm just browsing," she said politely. He smiled, but not with his mouth. His eyes didn't move. Of course. She took a step toward the closest display. A sleek shoulder bag, black patent, gold clasp, perched like art on a glass pedestal, her fingers hovered, never touched. Behind her, another associate emerged from the back, a white woman in a pencil skirt, whispering something low to the man behind the counter. He didn't respond, but his smirk answered for him. A white couple strolled in moments later, wearing matching tennis whites and grins that said they were used to this. The staff turned to them instantly. "Welcome," the man said warmly. "Let us know if you'd like to see anything." The woman who had whispered walked straight past her and offered the new arrivals a bottle of water from a silver tray. They accepted without acknowledging the only other person in the store. She moved to another shelf. A pair of sunglasses sat in a lit alcove. She tilted her head to read the tag. 1,950. She could buy 3. She could buy the shelf. She could buy the store. And yet, the man behind the counter finally looked at her again. His smile was too clean this time. "This isn't really a place for people like you," he said. "Not cruel, not loud, just certain." She didn't speak. Not because she didn't have words, but because none of them were worth giving. She nodded once. A small, slow gesture that gave nothing away. And then she turned, walked past the couple, past the hostess with the tray, past the man with the tablet. The bell chimed again. And the boutique exhaled, as if something had finally left that didn't belong. But they were wrong. She hadn't left anything behind. She had only started taking notes. She had been standing in the boutique for 2 full minutes before anyone acknowledged her, and even then it wasn't with words. The white man behind the counter finally lifted his eyes from the tablet in his hand, gave her a passing glance, and returned to scrolling. He didn't nod, didn't greet her. Just moved his finger lazily across the screen as if her presence was something the building would eventually absorb and remove. She walked further in, her heels soft against the polished stone floor. The displays were arranged like a gallery handbags on raised platforms, jewelry encased in glass, everything bathed in soft light meant to flatter the products but not necessarily the people. Another staff member, a white woman in sharp black tailoring, walked past her carrying a box of scarves. She didn't smile, didn't ask if she needed anything. She simply moved around her like one of the mannequins had wandered into the way. The boutique wasn't busy. There were only 2 other customers inside, a white couple near the back who were sipping bottled water and admiring a tray of watches. They turned their heads just slightly when she walked by, eyes moving up and down before exchanging a whisper and a shared smile. Not surprise, not shock, amusement. She kept walking. She moved with the ease of someone who was not lost, who had not stumbled in by accident. Her gaze rested briefly on a row of handbags along the wall, their price tags tucked discreetly behind the stitching. Her fingers didn't reach out. She didn't need to touch anything to know its worth. Still, no one approached. No one offered help. She turned toward the counter, where the man still stood with his tablet. His expression didn't change when she stepped closer. If anything, he seemed vaguely inconvenienced. She waited. Let the moment breathe. Then he looked at her fully for the first time and said it. "This isn't really a place for people like you." His voice wasn't raised. There was no anger, no obvious disgust, just indifference, just certainty. She blinked once. That was all. No gasp, no flinch. She didn't ask him to repeat himself. She had heard him clearly. Behind her, the couple laughed softly again. She didn't need to turn to know it was about her. She had seen that look before, heard that laugh. The kind people think you can't hear if you don't react. She exhaled slowly. Not because she was tired, but because restraint takes effort. Then she nodded, the gesture small and composed. And she walked away. No words. No scene. She had never expected welcome. But what she received wasn't neglect. It was precision. They had seen her, measured her, dismissed her. Not because she was invisible, because they hoped she would disappear. And soon, they would wish they had never made her remember that. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, almost pleasant, like she was accepting a glass of water instead of a slap in the face. She didn't raise her voice, didn't frown, didn't ask to speak to a manager. She just said it clear, even, and quiet. Then she turned, adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, and walked toward the door with the same calm grace she had entered with. No one followed her. No one called after her. Behind the counter, the white man returned to his tablet, tapping the screen with exaggerated nonchalance, like her presence had never been more than a minor inconvenience. The associate in the black skirt leaned into her coworker and whispered something with a little laugh, her lips twisting at the corners. The white couple near the back sipped their water and shared a glance, a silent exchange that said everything they thought they needed to say. No one stopped to consider who she might be. No one wondered what her story was. They had seen enough, made their assumptions, boxed her neatly into the kind of narrative they knew best. Someone who did not belong, someone who came too close to what they thought was theirs. She reached the door and held it open herself, the bell chiming above her head as she stepped back into the street. The sound was soft, almost cheerful, as if it didn't know what it had just witnessed. As if it hadn't just rung for a woman who was carrying something bigger than a purse and a quiet goodbye. Out on the sidewalk, the world continued. Cars hummed by. A man walked his dog. The air was bright and cool, and the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. She exhaled and let the insult slide down her spine like cold water. Not to forget it, but to keep it. To store it somewhere useful. She didn't look back at the window. She didn't need to see her reflection in the glass. She already knew how she looked. She already knew who she was. And she knew that one day soon they would too. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen. A message, short, straight to the point. It read, "Are we still moving forward on the offer?" She tapped back a response. Yes. Let's move forward. They didn't know who she was. But they would. And when they realized, it wouldn't come with fanfare. It wouldn't come with shouting or a viral video or a written complaint posted to social media. It would come with silence. With paperwork. With contracts passed across boardroom tables while they folded scarves and sprayed perfume samples on wrists. Because she had never needed to prove anything to them. She only needed to let them speak first. And they had said enough. The car door opened before she even reached the curb. A white-gloved hand pulled it wide as the soft purr of the engine hummed behind the soundproofed cabin. She slid inside without needing to speak. The driver gave her a small nod, closed the door gently, and returned to his seat without question. The Rolls-Royce eased away from the boutique like silk, pulled through fingers, quiet and smooth, leaving the store and its assumptions behind. Inside, the cabin was calm. Cream leather seats. Polished wood trim, a scent that smelled faintly of bergamot and authority. She exhaled once, not out of stress, but from the weight of holding her composure inside places that tried to make her feel small. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A message lit up on the screen. Offer accepted. Documents ready for signature. She smiled faintly and replied with 2 words. Proceed. Confirmed. The boutique she had just walked out of was one of dozens she had mapped, one of many she kept tabs on quietly. The industry knew her only by initials. A name that appeared on contracts, on funding reports, on the margins of development plans that never reached the public. She didn't give interviews, she didn't sit front row. She did not need to be seen to be in control. Her money spoke behind closed doors, and when it spoke, people listened. She had built her fortune piece by piece, not from inheritance or influence, but from grit disguised as grace. Her first investment had been small, barely noticed. A struggling boutique in Miami that everyone said was too far gone. Within a year, it was turning a profit. Within 2, it had expanded. By the 3rd, she had flipped it for triple. She didn't brag about her portfolio. She didn't carry her wealth like armor. She carried it like air all around her, moving silently through spaces that were never built for her but eventually became hers anyway. The boutique today was not a random stop. She had been watching it for 6 months. An overconfident location with underpaid staff, strong branding, weak leadership, the perfect target. She didn't need revenge. She saw no point in wasting time on emotion. This was business, clean and calculated. In the seat beside her rested a leather folder. Inside were profiles of current employees, marketing assessments, a full valuation report, and a quiet list of everything that needed to change the moment her signature hit the page. She stared out the window as the city passed by, people walking with urgency, taxis weaving through traffic, stores lighting up with early evening energy. The boutique would be closing soon. They would count the register, straighten the displays, and head home. None of them knew yet. Not the man behind the counter, not the woman with the scarf box, not the couple with the smiles. But soon, they would. They would open their emails and see a new name on the ownership line, a name they had heard once but didn't bother to remember. That silence would cost them. And she had already paid in full. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, flagged high priority. The manager opened it half asleep, still sipping from his first coffee, not expecting anything more serious than scheduling updates or low inventory warnings, but as he read the subject line, his body tensed. The words were brief, cold, and very clear. Urgent. Incident report. Customer interaction escalation. He clicked. Inside was a forwarded message from corporate, which had been copied to 2 regional directors and the vice president of client relations. A flagged report, a formal complaint. Not from the woman herself, but from someone higher, someone quiet and powerful. It wasn't written with outrage or emotion. It read like a legal document, methodical and composed. The tone made it worse. According to the report, a high-value client associated with one of their largest suppliers had been mistreated in store. The complaint listed details: ignored upon entry, not greeted, guided to a corner table, dismissed, laughed at, and then identified after the fact as someone whose investments touched multiple parts of their supply chain. No names were included. None needed. But he remembered her. The woman who had walked in without noise, who had asked for nothing, who had left quietly. The one they had spoken about after she left, laughed about in the break room as someone who must have gotten lost. He hadn't thought about her since, until now. His hand hovered over the mouse. He reread the email. The tone was not threatening. It was worse than that. It was calm. It mentioned numbers, names of brands she had direct ties to, contracts she could influence, future campaigns she could quietly shut down. The corporate office was asking for a written explanation. They wanted staff names, timelines, they wanted receipts. The same associates who had ignored her were now pretending to be busy, walking a little faster across the floor, hoping they wouldn't be pulled into a meeting they couldn't explain their way out of. The hostess looked anxious. The new trainee avoided eye contact. No one had said anything out loud, but they all felt it. Something had shifted. Whispers started spreading through the other stores too. Other locations had caught wind. One assistant manager in Chicago texted another in LA. A message chain began quietly circling. Did you hear what happened at the flagship? No one had details, but everyone felt the tension. Someone had made a mistake. Not just a bad service moment, not just an awkward comment. A costly one. A mistake that would ripple through numbers, into contracts, into meetings that now had her name quietly printed at the top of the agenda. She never came back. She didn't need to. She had said nothing. She had demanded nothing, but her absence now felt heavier than her presence ever had. The store buzzed with a quiet panic, like a place preparing for something it couldn't quite name but knew it could no longer ignore. And somewhere in a quiet office, her phone was off. Because her work here was already done. She did not send an email, she did not make a call, she did not speak a single word to the boutique that had made her feel like a ghost in full light. There was no Yelp review, no viral video, no hashtag. What came next required none of that. Instead, she made one quiet call to someone she trusted. A private showroom, not far from the first place, more discreet, smaller footprint, higher standards. She had worked with them before but never needed to call in favors. This time, she did not even have to explain. The assistant on the other end of the line already knew who she was. They knew her by name, by preference, by investment history. They knew she liked texture over flash, structure over trend. They knew she did not browse. She bought. An appointment was scheduled for the following afternoon. No public storefront, just a silver elevator, a top floor, and a room filled with things that matched her energy. The walls were soft gray. The lighting designed not to sell, but to flatter. There was tea ready when she arrived. The staff greeted her like they had been waiting, because they had. She tried on 4 pieces, bought 3. No discounts were mentioned. No price tags were questioned. No questions about who she was, only statements. Confident, respectful, clear. After the final bag was packed and her driver confirmed, she stood at the window of the private space for a long moment, looking out over the city. Somewhere down below, the boutique that had ignored her still sat on the corner like nothing had happened. But something had. That morning, the legal team for the company's parent brand had received a formal complaint. It came through the partner network, a supplier. Quiet, efficient. Inside, the report outlined what had occurred in precise, emotionless language. There was no need for embellishment. The facts were enough. A high-value client with direct ties to the supplier network had been denied basic service. Not overlooked, dismissed, with proof. The incident triggered an automatic clause in the supplier agreement requiring a review of in-store practices, staff behavior, and management oversight. Meetings were booked, audits requested. HR flagged the location for follow-up. 1 store, 1 moment, 1 woman. No one said her name out loud, but they were thinking it. Inside the boutique, the mood had shifted. Staff walked lighter, spoke softer. The man behind the counter no longer held his shoulders the same way. The assistant manager kept checking his email. The regional director was now scheduling in-person visits. There was tension in the space. Not fear exactly, but awareness. She would not be back. But her absence was doing the work she never had to speak into being. And as the elevator door closed behind her in the private showroom, her phone buzzed once with a thank you from the boutique director. Not for her purchase, for the clarity. She did not reply. She had already said everything she needed to say by choosing where she spent her silence. The story moved quietly at first, a whisper that floated from one associate to another. It started behind the counter, in the space where the staff folded scarves and reset the jewelry cases each morning. Then it drifted into management meetings, into late-night debriefs over espresso shots and spreadsheets, into the side comments during brand trainings. No one was told to talk about it, they just did. The woman who left without a scene. The one they misread so easily. The one who stepped into a Rolls Royce as if it was waiting to carry away a queen. No one remembered what she wore. That was the irony. They had judged her by the absence of a logo, the quietness of her luxury. But no one could recall the label on her bag, the name on her shoes. What they remembered was the silence. The way she did not flinch when she was dismissed, the way she smiled politely and left without correcting anyone. And now, no one was sure who had confirmed it first. Maybe someone from corporate, maybe a friend of a friend who worked at a showroom. But suddenly, everyone knew she was not a guest. She was a presence. She was a name on acquisition paperwork. She was the reason people were being asked to rewrite scripts and revisit standards. They never heard her say anything about what happened. She never posted a review, never made a statement. But her story became a fixture in the building. The woman who said thank you when she was being insulted, the one who walked out with dignity and came back with ownership. She didn't flex, she didn't threaten, she simply made her choices and let those choices speak louder than any confrontation ever could. It reached the new hires as a cautionary tale, buried in onboarding lectures and whispered just after training ended, the kind of story that didn't need to be confirmed because its truth was already felt. She came in once and no one helped her, one staffer would say. She bought 3 showrooms after that, someone else added. No, she bought the brand, another corrected, a little too dramatically. But still, everyone nodded. No one really knew the full details, but the impact remained. And so, the next time someone walked through the door wearing a soft blouse instead of bold print, with no loud colors, no giant logo across their chest, no entourage, just poise and presence, the staff paid attention. They greeted them, offered water, looked them in the eye, not from fear, but from awareness. Because that woman had taught them what power looks like when it isn't trying to be seen. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. And now, Every luxury boutique employee, from the cashier to the corporate assistant, knows the truth no manual ever taught. Power doesn't shout. It enters quietly. And it always remembers who made it feel unwelcome.